go back to the SACP conference where a press briefing is currently underway. Let's listen in.
That has happened. We all work again together as one. And I think it's important that democracy is understood in its broadest terms, not sometimes how it is viewed in our country, where contestations are only viewed with mischief and sometimes with suspicion, and not in the context of institutions that establish them. For instance, our Constitution guarantees participation of members in a democratic platform. Of course, to the extent that new strands within a Marxist-Leninist organization do happen, and that may cause certain tensions leading to this poster that we have seen recently. But overall, you know that generally in the Communist Party, we just indicated the other day to you that 7 of our provinces that went to congresses did not have an electoral process in the form of contestations. It's the first time we have had this. Of course, this poses challenges that we take over the new task of the 15th Congress Central Committee with the first mission to unite the organization. Of course, ensuring that the program that is adopted here is implemented by all members and not seen in the context of this or that group that may begin to emerge inside the Communist Party. We're a Marxist-Leninist organization. That's the framework in which we function. We're not a liberal organization. So going forward, the unity of the party will be non-negotiable. And the unity in implementation of programs will be non-negotiable. We're adopting a strong Congress program based on the theme of our Congress of building a powerful socialist movement of the workers and the poor. That will require a united and strong SACP. With these few words, I want to welcome you and hand over to Comrade Alex to run the process together with Comrade Tlengi for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Tlengi, for taking over. We handed over to you when we started the Congress on the 30th, that being Wednesday. And you did very well. I'm looking forward to your growth in that role and to greater heights. Let me take a question from our colleagues. You will be number 1, number 2 in the room. Number 3, you gave me a report. You will be number 3, so I'm interested to hear what you would like to add. And then you will be number 4, and in that order.
Hi, I'm Cindy, freelance journalist. I have a question. I'm not sure who would be the best to answer it, but we were not invited for the Commission feedback, so we have no idea what policy positions the SACP has adopted. Is there somebody who can just, one of the officials, maybe the General Secretary, who can brief us what the most significant policy positions are that the SACP is adopting from this conference, and more significantly will be taken to the ANC policy conference?
To the South African people is important. The workers and poor. My question is to the leadership collective. What is the immediate task of this national office bearers? And secondly, you said that this is the first time that there's a leadership contest. Aren't you worried that this could be the genesis of the factional tendencies that we've seen in other alliance components? And maybe my last question, you've adopted the resolutions that you've adopted, and those resolutions are meant to improve the living conditions of South African population. But there is only one government, that is the ANC government, that could make sure that the lives of ordinary South Africans are improved. And over the years, the SACP has been adopting policies and maybe sort of articulate them in government within the context of the alliance. Are you again confident that those policies will factor into the policy formulation of the ANC policy contracts and ultimately be implemented into government policies?
My apologies.
No, I'm done.
I'm fine. Okay, my apologies.
Thank you so much. My name is Govin Whittles from eNCA. Just on the contestation, in the past, the SACP successfully managed to consolidate leadership preferences ahead of conference. Right? This time, was the attempt to do that? Why do you think it failed? And then the now national chair, former GS, in his political report had warned of factions seeping into the SACP. Wanted to know whether you characterize that leadership contest as exactly that, factions that have seeped into the SACP, or have a different?
Thank you very much. I will stand up. I know how you stand up. I'm not intimidating you. I'm not intimidating.
Yeah, I have a neck problem. It spends the whole night looking down.
Sure.
So the best way to train it is to stand up.
I should.
Yeah.
Let me stand also.
So, yeah, I can match you. Madam, my name is Mawande from Sunday Times. Maybe let me start here, right next to you. Mama Joyce, we now all know that the SACP is broke. It was said several times, can't pay staff. And you were in that same position the previous term. You are back. What is it that is different that you do this time around to make sure that that situation doesn't repeat itself? And then, Bamzimande, yeah, okay. There's this ongoing issue about, your presence in the officials. Not that there's a problem with it, but people argue that isn't it time that maybe you give others an opportunity to lead. I know it's a different position, but you've more or less now for 3 decades been part of the officials, if we include even your position before the GS. What do you say to that argument that says that you just don't know when to give others an opportunity, and that maybe the factionalism that my colleagues were talking about is premised on exactly that, because once someone leads for too long, it's bound to make others impatient and getting frustrated, especially if the problems that were pointed out in your own political report about the state of the party at the moment is anything to go by. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just before the office bearers take the questions, Comrade Soli, for the first time in a press conference, you mentioned that this is a Marxist-Leninist party. That answers a lot of questions. Yeah, but you just forgot to mention that the majority of the people said Nzimande must be the national chair. It is not only the ones that you were representing. It is the majority who were sent by branches here. And it is not about him. We have a new General Secretary, Soli Mabaila. The reason why he is there is because Nzimande stepped down from that position. The same thing that Slovo did when he was the General Secretary of the SACP. Chris Hani was elected the General Secretary, replacing Joe Slovo as the General Secretary, and Slovo became the General Secretary. So let's hand over to the officials.
Okay.
No, you start. Okay. I'm really hoping to become more of a person than
And Comrade Joyce, by the way, this question was not there for you in terms of Marxist-Leninist principle. So that's why I started there, because we must handle it.
No, there are many issues. Let me say first one that as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing that...
Is there an induction here? So interjection.
There's nothing that will impede the collective work of the national officials of the SACP because of the presence of Comrade Nzimande. I've worked with Comrade Nzimande for more than 2 decades.
3 almost.
3 almost, yeah. And certainly, and I think with a clarity of mind, he has never at any point in time impeded the work that we have been doing. In fact, he has given more, particularly since 2009, when he went into government. All it needed was just from time to time a consultation, but otherwise we ran the affairs of the Communist Party. So there's no problem with his presence in the officials. We welcome that. And it's also important that we appreciate our own transition processes in the Communist Party and drawing in new blood. Dr. Masondo was a national chair of our Young Communist League, Comrade David. Comrade Madala, before he went back into government, had worked full-time at the party headquarters, having served the country very well in different capacities. So there is a strong collective that will engage on any issue collectively without being intimidated by the presence of Comrade Nzimande, because he has never intimidated us, actually. We have worked well together with him in that respect. And I think that it's important for the Communist Party not to be dictated by people outside or other forces, even by perceptions, even bourgeois perceptions, because bourgeois perceptions wants to drive us to a condition where we follow liberal institutions and their postures and how they do things and forget who we are. Even though we are living in a capitalist society, we are conscious of our aspiration for communism. As aspirant communists, we want to run our organization in that context as a Marxist-Leninist party. And in this case, the transition that has taken place when I was elected into the position of the second Deputy General Secretary, later on into the position of first Deputy General Secretary, now as General Secretary, I think has been sufficient enough not to be intimidated. Particularly, I've been given enough space to play a role, which I must say I really highly appreciate. I learned a lot from Comrade Blade as a leader, as a Marxist, as an intellectual, as a working class mobilizer. So we'll continue to work well together. As far as the issue about SACP being broke, I think you were there when we thanked our staff. Before the officials, the new officials were announced, we asked the previous officials, who were led by Dr. Nzimande, who carried the biggest burden of fundraising together with us in the officials in the Communist Party. It's a collective effort, it's never an individual effort. And that is why even before the announcement of the officials, they were there, we called them back so that they can execute that task as the General Secretary of the 14th Congress Central Committee to thank the contributions of our staff, which he did, and they accepted that. And majority of them were feeling like crying. But the bottom line is that they never left the trenches despite the difficulties that we have gone through. And they understood the conditions in which we operate. But the fact that SACP is broke doesn't make us a less capable party ideologically in terms of raising class questions, and we have proved beyond reasonable doubt that we can make interventions that have a lasting impact on the policy directions of our country. But the fact that we also, as our finance report indicates, over the last 5 years, we ran clean finances. You don't commend us for that. That communists run their finances well. Also say so. And say, Ms. Joyce Mulemropo, comrade, you are doing well, you are running your finances well. What can we learn? How can you teach others, those who are in government or in other organizations, to run finances well? There are never problems regarding these questions in the Communist Party. The issue about contestations and the posture, I think, why the unity processes had failed. In fact, last night, when this matter was processed in Congress, one of the provincial secretaries stood up and said, "Yeah, comrades, let's be patient about this process because we are not used to it." It's a new phenomenon. And we're like, yeah, everyone, even the Revolutionary Electoral Commission, because it has got a technical team that runs elections and experts on the election processes. The technical team keeps on letting them that, no, this is the next step of the procedure. Because they are not used to that. They are used to political engagement, consensus-seeking processes, and so forth. But we are learning. We have entered that space. We are happy about it. We hope going forward there will be no deeper fractions ideologically. Like I said, Marxist-Leninist organization have got many strands. There could be Marxist-Leninist Workerist, Marxist-Leninist Trotskyite, Marxist-Leninist Maoist, there's Marxist-Leninist Fidelistas. There are many other different strides and so forth, but we are a Marxist-Leninist organization that follows, in the context of South Africa, a national democratic revolution, which for us is a direct route towards socialism. If it resolves the three interrelated problems or contradictions of class, race, and gender inequalities, and resolve the situation and problems of poverty facing our people. So on that basis, we're able to define ourselves proper, and that's why we're also able to enter into alliances with the Liberation Movement, the ANC, COSATU, and several others. If it's a posture going forward that develops, there shouldn't be a problem if it happens within the framework of a democracy. The issue is that our democracy is much rigorous, and when it has been completed, it has a strong attraction, and you will see it when we move forward. We'll be moving forward as one, there's no doubt about that. The immediate task of the NOBs, quite surely, is to engage internally within the organization on building a strong organization based on the resolutions that we have adopted. Both the political report and the organizational report reflected some organizational weaknesses that we need to improve on, and Congress discussed that. And it is on that basis that, for instance, Congress, as it was articulating immediate issues that we need to do beyond building this powerful socialist movement of the workers and the poor, which is on its own, it's a massive task. It's a task to rejuvenate social mobilization of our people against any form of injustice and any form of exploitation. That task, they have said, there are key priorities. One of those, for instance, is on energy, the crisis of energy. There's a strong resolution in this regard that the Commission discussed extensively on how to respond to this. There's an issue, there's a resolution, for instance. You remember that there's been this debate about the party and the elections. Congress had felt that we needed to rebuild ourselves. Matlala, now this matter is resolved by Congress. They are not saying we should go and contest elections. They have expanded the framework of the resolution in the context of the state of the organization and the state of the movement. That now, perhaps more than ever, is the time to rebuild the movement, to reconnect with the masses along the framework of this broad socialist movement of the workers and the poor, and strengthen our ANC as a leading organ of the National Liberation Forces in this country, so that it doesn't collapse and set back the many gains of our martyrs of our revolutionary struggle. So that was a clear task. They said it will be immature to enter into the electoral space now. So to that extent, it's a big issue, a new mandate that has been given to the officials as a priority area. We'll be giving you the wording of that framework, but it's already agreed. Then, of course, the tributaries that we have spoken about in the context of the General Secretary, when he was articulating the new program of the SACP, the struggle for building socialism in South Africa, he articulated a number of tributaries that are related to this program. So there was a lot of emphasis on those tributaries. For instance, how to rebuild the trade union movement, basically organs of the working class to strengthen socialist struggles on the ground. So those are some of the priorities. Of course, we also dealt with, including this is also responding to this policy feedbacks. I think we realized that you should have been there when we were dealing with these final issues, basically, because it was largely more debate and so forth. But we'll share with you all the outcomes of the Commission's report. Then we can see what we have resolved. And there's a situation, the international situation that was also raised. For instance, problems of South Africa's position on countries like Morocco, which continues to occupy the people of Palestine, basically the people of Sahrawi in Morocco, and apartheid Israel, and its continuing brutalization of the Palestinians, including the fact that now government or ANC policy documents, instead of talking about completely closing the Israeli embassy in South Africa, because the previous resolution was about the downgrading of that embassy, they are now talking about reversing that particular decision. It's a setback on that particular decision when the situation of the Palestinians is not improving. In fact, it has been aggravated with more brutal assault, killing of journalists, openly in daylight, under camera and so forth, in the view of international community. So the Palestinians continue to suffer heavily under the Israeli regime. And therefore, Congress has taken a stronger position against Israeli occupation of Palestine, as well as the continued presence of Israel embassy in South Africa. There are others, solidarity with the people of Cuba, who continue to suffer under American blockade. That does not want any other country in the world to trade with that country. If you trade with Cuba, they punish you. So they want it to be continuously isolated. The same thing that they have done with Venezuela. Congress expressed strong solidarity as well with Venezuela. We also received this morning the sad news about the death of Comrade Ramon Balaguero, a great friend of the Communist Party and the African people, who was the head of International Department of the Communist Party of Cuba, who helped, who facilitated Cuba's help of many African countries and liberation movement, a great friend of our former General Secretary, now National Chair, Comrade Blade. When we were in Havana, we spent many, many hours engaging in ideological situation around the world. He was in the Sierra Maestra with Comrade Fidel. And when Fidel was to hand over power after ill health, he handed power to six people, amongst them was Comrade Ramon Paraguero, an outstanding revolutionary of the working class and the communist movement. So we really, the Communist Party dips its banner in its memory, in his memory, Comrade Ramon Cabrera, a brilliant Marxist intellectual too. So there's an extensive section regarding that, the international situation without going every country by country. In Swaziland, stronger resolution in that regard, as well as the situation in Zimbabwe, the continued arrest of trade unionists, for instance, that is really disturbing to us. And members of the Communist Party of Zimbabwe that are being harassed and arrested, even on trumped-up charges. For instance, one of the comrades has been arrested and charged on a case of somebody who died several years ago when he jumped from a balcony drunk. It's in the records. Now they just arrest you and charge you with that case. I mean, this is a new phenomenon, and it's completely unacceptable. So Congress has expressed strong international solidarity message with different countries, of course, against the war of NATO and the USA, or between the NATO forces that are trying now to stoke the possibility of even a nuclear war. But this is my addition, the possibility of even a nuclear war. But Congress has condemned this aggressiveness of imperialism led by the NATO group using Russia's special military operation in Ukraine as a leeway, and therefore now plunging the whole world into an economic crisis. I think it was in the context of our interventions, and I think as we speak, you would have seen the man that just came in here. He's the Dean of Diplomatic Corps in South Africa, the Ambassador of Eritrea. I spoke eloquently or clearly about that country. It's our sister country, and we have a sister party that we engage with, and we want to send our special greetings to President Isaiah Afwerki and the leadership of government in Eritrea, who have always stood side by side with us and with the liberation movement on the African continent. We welcome you. Like I said, the international space is quite broad, but Congress has really came out much more stronger and condemned even xenophobic behavior taking place in some parts of South Africa, including the recent killings against foreign nationals. We really think that we need to reflect on this as South Africans, because truly speaking, irrespective of the conditions that we find ourselves in, there can be no foreigner of an African on the African continent. This is extremely despicable. African people must stop self-hate and embrace their Africanness. Myself, black as I am, I'm very proud of myself. I've never doubted myself. It's only the Europeans, when we are in their countries, that they will look at you with racial tones, not in my own continent. And I will never treat an African as a foreigner on the African continent. That posture, it's incorrect. But of course, as an internationalist organization, because of our level of consciousness, we've gone that far to appreciate who we are as communists. These are some of the snippets. I think the other office bearers can add. Comrade David Masondo, Second Deputy General Secretary, before the announcement of the other officials, it was the two of us, and we said we cannot allow any interregnum will occupy the space. So he chaired some parts of the commissions before, but other members who were in the steering committee were also participating at Congress. So we are aware about every other thing that was taking place. Thank you very much.
Oh, by the way, the steering committee is still in charge.
Yeah.
Are there additions from
Now I must also get used to this, you know.
I must say that when we were doing the drafting work from the captains, are you rewriting capital?
No, I think that the General Secretary actually has said all that needs to be said. Quite comprehensively as well. Maybe just to add, you know, on this one matter that, you know, when there is a transition in terms of change in leadership, it's inevitable that different people may have different ideas on who should emerge. That's not unhealthy, and it's not something that must be suppressed. That possibly is the main cause of this, doing this thing that the General Secretary is saying we're not used to, you know, because some people feel that, well, since by the transition, you are only looking at it at the level of the General Secretary. It's not just happening there only, or these other officials. The Central Committee, there are comrades in the Central Committee who are actually retiring, some of them. You know, there is going to be a new, younger generation that comes in and elected, hopefully, well, definitely, I think, into this Central Committee. So it's a general shift and change. So when that happens, some people will come and quite forcefully and say, we think this is what should happen, you know, we think that is what. I don't want to speak for myself because the General Secretary has covered that, you know. I said it when I stepped down. I wasn't pushed, by the way. I did that voluntarily to say the party will decide how to make use of me if it still wants to. If the party had said at this Congress, we will co-opt you as a member of the Central Committee, as an ordinary member of the Central Committee, I would have accepted that. And I mean that. I wasn't looking for anything other than what the party would say. But as Comrade Alex had said, there was this strong push that has become the national chairperson. You know, sometimes at a personal level it puts you in a difficulty. I just want to be honest. You know. You say, no, man, but I can't really saying I'm stepping down as General Secretary and I still want to take another official's position. But then when the membership says quite strongly, of the 10 provinces, if you count the YCL, 7 of them said, we want you to be the national chairperson. What do you do as an individual? You fight and say, no, I'm not going to do it. Or they feel strong that, okay, let me do it. I mean it, Comrade Soli was being modest, the General Secretary. We have worked now, Nopala, I think, we're close to 30 years now. You started in the party office as a volunteer, you know, and from there became the national organizer, and then moved to being a member of the Central Committee, second Deputy General Secretary, first Deputy, and then now the General Secretary. If there is one person that I've worked that closest to in the SACP, is this new General Secretary of ours. And my own view, as we've actually been operating, has been to say, let's give each other space for comrades to realize. I think I'm not patronizing RGS, but I think he'll make a great General Secretary. That's my own view and prediction. And one would support him. Like in this role that I'm playing, he is the General Secretary, he's going to be supported. I'm not going to be using my presence here to be an obstacle. I've never acted as an obstacle to anyone. Of course, there was this narrative. Some people wanted me out. So they're trying to find a reason. What is the reason? No. We don't want a past General Secretary interfering with the new General Secretary. There is no such really. I mean, the party also has had this experience before. So I'm here to serve at the behest of the party. I just thought that let me add that so that I put you at ease. I'm very glad about these changes that are happening. You know, the emergence of the former chair of the YCL to actually this position, which means, by the way, our resuscitation of the YCL is paying dividends, because we would not have had that ordinarily had we not revitalized the YCL, to say that. So that's all. Otherwise, I really didn't want. I think that the GS has actually covered things nicely. I'm seeing myself now in these press conferences, as I have said, more as a passenger, you know, and adding here and there where we want to add and be led as we are being led right now. Thank you.
You've been active passenger. You know, in trying to calculate something called momentum. So when a car is moving and you're in the car, you should appreciate your movement as well. Because if you apply brake suddenly, your movement will continue.
Colleagues, it is time for the plenary to take the Congress declaration. The first Deputy General Secretary is required in the plenary to present the declaration.
It will be important for the national office bearers to also attend
for that purpose. After that, the General Secretary will present the closing remarks, depending on the leadership process. So I'm not sure whether we should invite the media colleagues for the declaration.
Yes.
Just one more question.
Yeah, also.
But just sorry to.
You know why we were taking time to get here? There were just more questions outside. So they sent us a letter to say, please come back, but let's allow you.
This is a ton of questions. Has the conference decided if it endorses the president of the ANC to run a second term?
And mine is related to his.
What is that decision?
Okay. Mine is related to his. National Check, perhaps he was not moved because it's directed to. In your
I suspect, National Check, I suspect he's a former leader of us.
Yeah, well,
you must get used to this new reality.
No, wait. No, it relates to your political report, National Chair. Well, when you were, yeah. So in your political report, you said, or you spoke on the parliament. You alleged, or you made an observation that there is counter-revolution by the complainant and those associated with them. And this looks like a repetition of what had been the stance of the SACP initially. And then later you come to and say, no, but over time you realized and then move back. Isn't it disingenuous of the SACP to say it is against issues that pertain to corruption, which is alleged in the matter of Parapara? It was not advisable for you to wait for that process that is ongoing, which is the House investigation, to conclude such that there are conclusive answers, because at the moment, none of us know really what happened, at least those of us who are outside. So in that regard, do you think that it was...
Right, that briefing post after the SACP Congress taking place, we're hearing from newly elected leadership there. Solly Mapaila, elected as the new General Secretary. He answered a number of those questions, saying firstly and foremostly that the party is building a powerful socialist movement for the workers and the poor, saying also that it's a Leninist Marxist party first and foremost. And obviously there we heard questions being raised about Blade Nzimande still being included in that leadership. Blade Nzimande indeed addressing that issue at the wrap, or the sort of towards the end of that briefing, saying that he fully supports Solly Mapaila as the new General Secretary and that he believes he's going to be an excellent GS. Some of the other issues addressed there in that briefing, Solly Mapaila saying that despite the SACP being broke, their finances are in good order, that they receive clean audits, and that their party officials understand the situation and accept things as they are. They have not left the trenches yet. Also saying that the contestation of positions within the leadership is a new phenomenon, but that they're adapting to those new processes and learning through those processes. Also saying that energy is one of the key priorities that need to be addressed in the inequalities of class, race and gender in order to bring South Africans a better society here. So that Congress still carrying on tonight, and we'll continue bringing you some information as it unfolds from the SACP Congress.